Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the workshop. So in our last video, we talked about what I think a beginner should go out and buy for tools. And if you didn't see that video, I'll leave a link to it down in the description. So now we're going to put that into practice, and we're going to do our very first project. Now, as I mentioned, I had to give away all of my work surfaces and tables and workbench and everything. So I don't have anything except a floor to work on. So we're going to make some sawhorses, which are going to end up being the platform for our very first work table. Now, I hate working on the floor. It's uncomfortable, it's rough on the knees, and it's just not in the right position to do woodworking. So I am going to find something to make a temporary table out of. And what I have is a couple of garbage cans, which will work nicely. Alright, so all I've done is I've taken two garbage cans and a couple of 2x4s, and I've made a temporary workstation, which we're going to mount our miter saw to. I'm also going to clamp the feet in the back to secure this so that it doesn't move or tip forward. Alright, so now our miter saw is secure. It's not going to go anywhere. We can make cuts without worrying about moving. The next thing I need to do is, because we're working with really long 2x4s, I need some way to extend the platform out. Now, usually I have a bunch of scrap wood laying around my shop, but all of that went in the garbage along with the tables and stuff. So I'm going to get some books to prop the work up on, and I'll see you back in a second. Okay, so I found a bunch of books and magazines, and I've stacked them up so we are extending our work surface out. We're providing support for both sides of the cut, and that way we don't have anything moving. Now, before we get into cutting, how high should a sawhorse be? If you let your arms hang freely, the height is to the second knuckle on your pinky. Wait a minute, let me correct myself there. It's actually the third knuckle, or first, depending on how you're looking at it, where the pinky connects to the hand. And I want to stress, however, that work height is very dependent on you. And you're custom building your workshop, so it should be built for whatever's comfortable for you. And it's ultimately going to depend heavily on what kind of woodworking you enjoy the most. This is just a good starting point, and it's mostly ideal for people who do metal-bodied hand planes and a lot of hand work. If you use wooden-bodied hand planes, the soles are much thicker, so your bench needs to be a little bit lower. If you use a lot of power tools or you do carving, then your bench wants to be a little bit higher to bring the work closer to your eye level, so you don't have to bend over quite as much. But start here. It's only sawhorses. We can always make more at a different height, so this is a good point to play around with the height and see what feels the most comfortable for you. For me, the proper height is 29 inches. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on how long your arms are, how tall you are. You got to figure it out for yourself, but knowing the height of the sawhorse, we just need to apply a little bit of math and geometry to figure out how long our legs need to be at the angle that we're cutting. All right, now for our sawhorses, we're going to be using two very common angles of 45 degrees and 22.5 degrees. So I've set my angle finder up to 22.5 degrees, and I'm going to set my bevel gauge to match. All right, so now I've set 22.5 degrees off of 90. I'm going to use this to set the blade on my saw. Never trust the gauges on here, especially if you ended up getting a cheap saw. They're almost never correct. now that the saw is set up, we're ready to make some cuts. Now, if I've calculated this properly, you're going to need 6 2x4s, 8 feet long, to make 2 sawhorses, because you really can't do anything with 1 sawhorse. If I didn't calculate this properly, then you'll see a little note here telling you the appropriate number of boards, but let's get started. All right, so with eye protection and hearing protection on, we're gonna make our first cut into the end of the board. First we have to plug in the saw. I forgot to mention that the saw has been unplugged this whole time. You always want to unplug a power tool whenever you're setting it up. Now we're going to measure the length of our legs. For me, that was 29 3/4 of an inch. And we're going to measure from the tip here to the base of the next cut. Make a little mark, and then we take our angle gauge and scribe a line. Hopefully that's dark enough for everyone to see. And we want to make sure that we're cutting on the waist side of the line. Now the waist side of the line, we measured from this end to this point, so the waist side is right here. So we're going to make our cut on this side of the line. And that's 1 leg down. Now we're going to do the exact same thing 3 more times for a total of 4 legs. Now that we have our first 4 legs cut, we're going to do another 4, only I'm going to leave them slightly longer at 30 inches. And we're going to flip the board to make opposing angles at each end. All right, so now what we should have is 4 legs of equal size with the same angle cut in at both ends, and another 4 legs of the same size with opposing angles cut in. And what we're going to do is reset the angle of the saw and cut a different angle in on these at a bit steeper, because what's going to happen is the legs are going to be set up like this, but we need a bit of we need a 45-degree angle cut in here for them to match up. All right, so I've set my angle finder for 45 degrees. I'm going to set my bevel gauge to match. Now I'm going to change the angle on the saw after I unplug it. All right, so now what I want to do is I'm going to measure 29 3/4 from the tips of these angles. Now we'll see how that works out. Well, that looks like the beginnings of an A-frame to me. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 of each leg, and lining them up, we're going to use our drill with either a bit or a countersink and pre-drill some holes to put in regular old 2.5-inch decking screws. right through here. And we're going to do 2 or 3 screws per leg. Now, once we've done that to all the legs, we're going to measure and cut some support pieces here in the leg. All right, so now we're going to put in some support to the frame. And where you place this is kind of personal preference. However, too high up and it won't provide enough support. Too low and it's going to be in your way. It'll also prevent you from being able to stack your sawhorses. So we're going to choose a spot, I don't know, maybe about a foot down, and take a quick measurement. That's about 8 inches. So I'm going to cut them all to 8 inches, and we're going to need 4 of those. All right, so we're going to unplug our saw and set it back up to the 22.5 degrees. And now we're going to measure our piece to 8 inches, I believe is what I said. And we are cutting this at opposing angles. An important note about using a miter saw is you always want to let the blade stop before you move anything. That'll prevent any accidents. But now we have our trapezoidal shape piece at 8 inches long. We're going to do 3 more of those. All right, now let's give that a fit. That looks good. I'm pretty happy with that. We're going to put 2 screws in either side, pre-drill the holes. And there we go, that is sturdy. Do that to the other 3. All right, so now we have 4 legs. 2 legs per sawhorse. And it's time to cut and mount the 2x4 that's going to go across the top. All right, so now when deciding what length to cut your top boards to, you have to consider what the primary use of the sawhorse is going to be. In my shop, it's going to be for supporting work off the bench or supporting sheet goods to break down. So I think I'm going to go with either 3 feet or 3.5 feet. All right, so we're all done with angled cuts now, so I've set the miter saw back up to 90 degrees. I'm going to take off a very little sliver from the end here because I hate how construction lumber is rough on the ends. And now I have decided that 3 feet is my ideal length. So I'm going to measure and mark. And we're going to do 1 more, just like that. All right, so now we're going to set this up. I want a little bit of overhang on the ends here. Just eyeballing in a little bit. And now we're going to drill 2 holes in each side to anchor the top to the legs. Now we have 2 things that look remarkably like sawhorses. We just have 1 more board to cut. We're actually going to put another brace piece along here just to give it that really rock solid stability. Depending on how heavy a duty you want these to be, it's actually not necessary, but I like to do it. So we're going to cut another board. We're going to measure down there and cut and drill and screw that in, and then we'll be done. they are. 2 rock solid sawhorses. I mean, these things can hold anything. I mean, and they're super simple, and it actually turned out I only needed 5 2x4s. Although I have to admit, having the extra helped out a lot with, you know, making that temporary bench. So in all honesty, I would probably go out and buy 8 or 9 to begin with. And you know, don't worry, you're going to use them because we're going to be making tables and benches, and we're going to need all that stuff down the road. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with buying a few extra 2x4s, but there you go, 2 rock solid sawhorses. So since I had that extra 2x4, I just gave it a quick chop to give you an idea of where you can go from here for a solid work surface. You know, a couple of 2x4s, or even 2x10 cut in half, or 2x12. You know, I mean, this is a good work surface, and I think that's actually what I'm going to do. Is I'm just going to go out and get the 2x10 and turn that into my first workbench using these sawhorses as a platform, and then from there we'll build out the rest of the shop. Alright, so thanks for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments for me. But we came, we saw, we created some sawdust. Now it's your turn to go out to your shop, make something, and I'll see you next time.